Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Abetamarco, and I've caught a cold. But if that's the penance that I have to endure for paying tribute to our beloved schnitzel brain, then I'm happy to have it. And I'll do it again. So, welcome. Thanks so much for being here to celebrate the life and work of David. Here we are in this complex that David helped to inaugurate 40 years ago. He directed at least 6 premieres of groundbreaking work in those years from, I believe, 85 to 90. And we give special thanks for all that today. And special thanks also to Jose Luis Valenzuela, who began his work that same time period and continues to carry forth the leadership and the legacy with his resident theater company, Latino Theater Company. They're terrific and they do great work, and they've been really great helping us put this together. So a nice little applause for the Latino Theater Company. Okay, now I'm going to refer to my notes. Past tense. It's almost impossible to do justice to someone who's had such a long, wide-reaching, profound impact as this man we're here to pay tribute to, certainly for me. I'd venture to guess the same is true for many of you here today or watching through the live stream. He taught me freedom in my work as well as constraint. David was more than a director, a groundbreaker, an artist, a collaborator, a community builder, a confidant, a mentor, an influencer, a party host, a friend. David was a solar system. Whenever he came to town, to work, to play, to celebrate, to commemorate, or ironically enough, to memorialize, a function he grew adept at in the 80s with the onset of AIDS. His centrifugal force pulled people into his orbit. For me, Schnitzel Brain was an occasion for which I clocked thousands of miles to be a part of. From DC to Williamstown to LA to New York to London, the tracks of his leopard-printed presence are clearly still fresh. For many of us, they'll never fade. Here, I offer some excerpts. First, from Stacy DeRasmo's gorgeous book, The Long Run. That's what a powerful scene feels like. Skin to skin. All kinds of intimacies that flow through and around categories of romance, friendship, artistic partnership, and collaboration. Up that close, everything, the beautiful, the troubled, the tangled, comes through. I am, however, quite sure that there is no real art making without the risk of heartbreak. The skin to skin that can generate art is a state that can last for a second or for years, and that always carries the possibility of the pain of loss, end quote. So what the hell difference does art make? Some present tense and future from Edmund White's Nocturnes for the King of Naples. The answer to that riddle, what's preserved but moves, what existed only to pounce. Yet, you are everywhere. Look around you, people. Schnitzel Brain's legacy is here. This room is proof enough. I give you John Fleck.
Leopard is forever. Lo sapetio, David, prima d'andar soldato. David ave Tony, Sandra, Friar, Michael, tui, 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 tu, aveva David, aveva me, you, tornò la sua sposa e con un nuovo amore volò spegnere la fiamma, cegli bruciava il cuore. David, oh David, oh David, where are you, David? I was just talking to Admiral Teller yesterday that it hasn't felt real, being here, but it feels kind of real right now. And it's so surreal being in this room, in this very theater. In 1990, David blessed me by casting me in a Tony Kushner's play called The Illusion. And oh man, we were just flying high. We were young, creative energy. I just met him a few years before when I saw the Weeba show. What year was the Weeba show? No. 80? In the 80s. Well, anyways, I had met him a few years before, and when I saw Weeba and Philip Littell and Jerry Franklin on stage, and my compass just pointed, that's the direction I want to go. And then I met David Schweizer, the maestro behind it all, and who just happened to be having a workshop under the auspices of his production company, Modern Artist. At the time, that's where I met Sharon Barr and Kurt Fuller, Steve Levitt, a bunch of people. And it was the first time David encouraged me to write a piece. Which I did, a pagan holiday, which eventually went to the Lhasa Club. So I used to blame David. I blame you for me becoming a performance artist. But you know, but we did. We co-created Psycho Opera, Bless Our Little Fishes. We worked on. I cannot think of one show that I wrote that David hasn't either directed, co-directed, or at least looked at. And I'm so thankful that I got to see him at Sandra Singh Lowe's piece at the Odyssey Theater that he directed and he had a featured role in. And he looked so frail, but he still had that fire burning inside of him, which I thought would just propel him forever. And at the party afterwards, where you had the box wine, it was so much fun. Thank you. He said, hey, we need to have a Zoom rehearsal, because I had a show coming up at the Odyssey shortly thereafter. So we Zoomed, and he was in New York, and anyway, so 5 days later, he died. So I'm just so thankful I got to do that with him. Listen, bad segue, but I'd like to read a letter from Lori Weiner. She emailed me this. She's living in France now. Lori Weiner, for those of you who don't know her, she's a writer. I met her when she was a critic at the LA Times, when there used to be a few critics and a few more newspapers than there are now. So here's Lori's letter. So, on the evening of December 5th, I was about to give a talk at the Lambs Club in New York City about Oscar Hammerstein II. He had been a member, having joined in 1920 at the age of 25. Because I live in France now, a dozen of my relatives and friends had traveled to be there. David came in with Greg Merton, and I told him again how much we had loved his direction of Orson Shadow that had just recently closed at the Theater for the New City in the East Village. Tom and I caught the final performance 4 days before I introduced David to a couple of actors, friends, whom he did not know. Then I went about greeting other people when I heard Tom yell, "Medical emergency, call 911. Tom had been standing near David when he got up to get a drink of water, and he collapsed. Tom tried to catch him, and he knew David was unconscious when he hit the floor because his head offered no resistance. After a few moments of confusion, my stepdaughter, Jessie, and her friend Jess, both of whom had taken a CPR class in high school, started to administer CPR and mouth-to-mouth, with Tom holding David's head in his hand and sometimes spelling Jessie when she needed to rest. The two friends I just introduced to David, Adam Heller and Liz Larson, were speaking to David softly and lovingly, kind of cheering him on the couple of times that he seemed to be trying to take a breath on his own. Greg and I held hands. The shepherd, the head of the Lambs Club, ushered everyone else out of the room into an antechamber while we waited for the EMT to arrive. It seemed to take forever because we were in Rockefeller Center and the Christmas tree had just been lit the night before. It was as congested as Times Square. 2 EMT arrived in 20 minutes, but it was 40 minutes before they had the full crew and all the equipment. Caleb arrived before the EMT. They worked on an unresponsive David for about 10 minutes before taking him to Lenox Hill, where he died 2 hours later. I didn't know what to do, and the shepherd told me, well, the right thing to do is to proceed, if I felt I could. He brought the crowd back in and spoke to them. He said, here at the Lambs Club, we have a tradition. When someone is in trouble, we don't have a moment of silence. We applaud for them. So let's applaud for David. And everyone did. I felt I could then proceed because my talk was about the communal nature of making theater and going to the theater and how bonding together will be the only thing that can get us through the mess that we're in. The scene that had just played out in the room with everyone coming together to help David was an illustration of just that. I was thinking, if only David had stayed home, he might still be alive. But the shepherd said if he had collapsed 2 hours earlier, it would have been in the cold, surrounded by strangers. Instead, he was inside the oldest theatrical club in the country and surrounded by a lot of love, even from people who did not know him. I really believe he felt it. It seemed so fitting, a final night for a consummate artist of the theater.
Hi, everybody. Hi, friends. Hi, theater friends. I'm glad we could be together. I'm sorry David's not with us. He always brought us together. I'm Ann Militello. I'm a lighting designer. I worked with David several times, and we became very close friends. I met him first here at LATC. I was doing a production of Three Ways Home. I was living in New York City, but I came out here to do a production. And David was doing Demon Wine. I didn't know him then. And it was an amazing cast. It was Tom Waits, Carol Kane, our own Jan Monroe was in that. And we hadn't really talked, and I was just so impressed by him and the whole production. When I got back to New York, it turns out that I had been hired at New York Theater Workshop to do a production of Investigation of a Murder in El Salvador. And the director turned out to be David Schweizer. So only months later, I worked with him in New York at the Perry Street Theater, in which we both got Drama Desk nominations, and I fell in love with him. And it was a coincidence. I didn't realize until after we started working that he was the one that did this production here that I was so impressed with. He was an amazing director to work with because he was a designer's dream to work with, a dream and nightmare sometimes. If you know David, he got really passionate sometimes, and passion would sometimes turn into words that you cannot say in the theater anymore during tech rehearsal. As I was at a tech rehearsal last night with my students at Cal Arts, and I wanted to scream at them, and now, that would get me fired immediately, but David did scream sometimes, and it was never really personal. It was because he was passionate and he was really into the art. We then went on to do The Waiting Room, Lisa Loomer's The Waiting Room at the Taper. And I remember during one tech rehearsal, he got so mad at all of us, just all of us, the cast, me, everybody, and he flew out the door, slammed the door behind him, and then fell because he had slammed the door so hard. And I went back out and I said, just come back in, come on. And then he was fine. He was great to work with, but he never missed a beat. he knew when that light cue was off by 2 seconds. He knew if the color was off. And he was great. He encouraged me to experiment, which I love to do anyway, but that's why he was a great partner. He was never, he never shied away from the amazing display of a scene change. So if anybody knows and worked with him, how he choreographed every scene change between scenes, it was amazing. The choreography of the actors and the lights had to be right. The scene change became a whole thing by itself. Yeah, he just understood everything. He was a wonderful friend. He wrote us all really amazing emails, for those of you who have received David's emails, with the capital letters where we needed them, you know, emphasizing every wonderful thing. I went through them last night, and it was hard to do. I was looking through all of them, and my heart was breaking. But he never missed a birthday. Never missed my birthday, always remembered, and wrote me, as he did, he always, you know, would head it with "my dear shining pal," you know. And I thought it was so wonderful of him, and he always, you know, signed it your very own Silvery D. You know, he sent photos of flowers and his vacation photos and goofy pictures of himself, and it was so wonderful. And he always, you know, entertained me with stories of his amazing life, his affairs with Stephen Sondheim. And Tennessee Williams was like, "Who else did you sleep with?" But he didn't. Yeah, he wouldn't tell everything, but yeah, he did. Oh my God! Wow. You're going to have to tell us about that, because that's something new. But he had amazing friends, and through him, I think John Fleck, that's how I met you. Through when he was in town, you probably had something at your house. That's how I met him, and he opened me up to meeting many of you. So, wow, I hope we all see each other again after this, because, you know, he was the person that kind of brought us together in a circle often, and I'll really miss him. He was quite supportive when, in my one of my midlife crises, I became a belly dancer, and and he came to Dharma Greb, you know, and I was so nervous because I was dancing at Dharma Greb restaurant on Sunset. And I was like, oh God, you know, he's always known me to be up there in the booth, and here I am with a big costume. But I wanted to just play or just make some sound for David to say hello. Oops, I hear a telephone. I hope that's not mine. Oh, so I'm just going to play a couple of ringtones. One. To give us a moment to really think about what he meant to us and for us and what he did for our community. To think about the love he had for all of us. And to think about the love we have for him and how he's with us today. Thank you, David.
Michael Sargent.
That was beautiful, Anne. Forgive my notes. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Sargent. I'm a writer and director and a longtime collaborator of David's. Since I was 22, so about 35 years, I wrangled an introduction to him via Bob Egan at the Taper. Reza Abdo brought him to an evening of my one-act plays in the little 24-seat backspace at Theater off Hollywood Boulevard. That night, he invited me out to Venice the next week, and we shared stories and talked about possible projects, and that was it. I was in the club for life. He started directing me. He directed readings and workshops and productions of my plays here and in New York. Even after I was an award-winning director myself, I would apprentice myself to him, and I worked as his assistant many times to keep learning on the job. The whole time, he also wanted to make movies. Even before he directed one of my plays, he found a patron for us, his pal, the actress Pippa Scott, and she paid me to write a screenplay for David to direct, my first screenplay. That was our project Sugar Daddy, which ended up eventually at Orion Pictures, but we never actually got to make. We sold another project to Bill Pullman in Castle Rock, also unmade. I went on my own and sold 4 more screenplays, also still unmade. Finally, about 7 years ago, we decided to make a movie ourselves. Do-it-yourself always worked for us in the theater. We always went back to it, and I'm only surprised it took us so long to do it in the movies. I adapted one of my first plays for the screen as a star vehicle for our friend Alan Mandel. Starting in 2020 during the pandemic, we assembled a team and we managed to get together 2 or 3 times a year and shoot for a weekend. Up until October of last year when we got our last 3 scenes in the can. I flew to New York on Thanksgiving last year and stayed with David at the Loft on Fulton Street to work on our rough cut during what turned out to be the last week of his life. He was in rare form. It was the holiday season, and we saw friends. We took in closing night of the play he had just directed and held court at his party. He was planning his famous New Year's Day party. Thursday, his last day, we spent all day together working on the rough cut. We were anticipating the last scene coming in from the editor on Friday. That evening, we watched Nicole Wallace, and then he went off to a lecture, and I went off to see Gypsy on Broadway. Only he didn't come back. I know he expected to. We had reservations at PJ Clark's the next night. He and I and Caleb were going to have dinner, and then they were going to walk me over to 54 Below, where I had tickets to see Lorna Luft and Andrea Mercado, which he'd been teasing me about all week. You come to New York and you buy a ticket to that. Even as by Wednesday he started saying maybe he should be trying to get tickets for him and Caleb to join me. In the months since, everyone involved in our movie has pulled together and it's now on the verge of being finished. We expect to hit the festival circuit with it in his honor next year and maybe sooner. I'd like to share a scene with you. It's going to be the biggest screen I've seen it on yet. It's the very first one we shot. It features our stunning leading man, Mr. Rick Cosnett. I don't know if he's here, and our beloved Alan Mandel. Written by me, directed by David Schweizer. Happy birthday, maestro. He did it just like he promised me he would.
What do you do for work, Chance?
Did a little construction. I'm out of practice.
Rent's due tomorrow.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
Oh, let's be done with it. The role of landlady is one that holds zero appeal for me. I would never ask you to sleep with me, Chance. I wouldn't. No, I couldn't. I'm a sick old man. I've got more morphine in me than blood. But, friend, there are things you could do for me.
You mean like gardening, things around the house?
Well, not exactly. Oh, look at you sweat. I used to sweat like that in buckets. Yes, I was famous for it. Gladiator scenes. Now I don't recognize myself. But once upon a time, I had a body just like that. I was proud of it too. Showed it off in all my movies.
I don't know anything about old movies.
I wore a lot of headdresses, loincloths, before taxes, or color. I knew Zazu Pitts when she had short hair. I got money from before you were born. Ancient money, $10,000 bills. Of course, they don't circulate anymore. I'm sitting on stacks. I won't be around much longer. My doctors gave me 6 months ago. I don't have any family to leave my millions or the castle. People think I'm dead. If they remember me, they just assume I'm dead. I don't blame them. I ought to be dead. I'm an almost dead man, Chance. And you're all I think about, 24/7. Since the second you arrived, you're all that's on my mind.
Can I think about it?
Sure.
And now we have a special eulogy from someone who was unable to get down to the stage. I'd like to introduce Richard Kramer.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, and I'm going to light him myself.
Oh, good.
He's up here in the dark. So as soon as I can find my phone, where I put it. I know.
Yes.
Here it is.
Like me beautifully. How's that? Is that good?
Yes.
Good. This is amazing, an amazing event for me because it should not be happening. And that's the thing I've been wrestling with since David died, which is this does not exist because it cannot be happening to my friend David, who was so precious to me, so important to me for 54 years. He was the first person I met when I got to college. I had one desire of college. I told my parents, I said, I want to meet at least one interesting person in the 4 years, and I did. He was the first person that I met, and he turned my life around, you know, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I adored him. He was like my big brother. I was in awe of him, and he was very kind to me from the beginning. I auditioned, the first thing was I auditioned for a play that he was doing, a production of The Glass Menagerie, which is a beloved play of his. And he told a friend of mine asked, how did Richard do it? And David said, he thought about it for a second, and he said, well, it was the most Brechtian performance I've ever seen. But I don't think he knows it. And that was sort of the beginning of our long, only positive, only fun friendship. There's so many moments that I have to like sit at a pad and go, shoo. All of them are vivid. It was very weird to see Tony today, because when I saw Tony, he looked like David. I was like, what's going on here? But David was very playful with me. And he enjoyed that, and so did I. And I'll tell you just one example of that. We had, David, when he was a kid, had a very, I don't know what the word is, a very difficult childhood. When he was born, the doctors told his mother that they should spend time with him now because he wouldn't be alive after the weekend. And David carried that with him all his life. And David's life was basically, fuck you to those who said I would die. And he squeezed 75 incredibly productive years out of that, and it was fun. That was the other great thing about him. David had no self-pity and no interest in self-pity as a subject. He just didn't have it. And we came up with this thing. When he was in bed for 20 years as a little boy, he became fascinated with the court of Versailles in the 18th century. And he obsessed with Marie Antoinette. I can't say another thing. And we had a correspondence that lasted for about 30 years between Marie Antoinette and her ill-starred best friend, me, who made the mistake of being kind to her and paid a very high price that I'll tell you afterwards. But David and I got endless pleasure from that. And he could go there. That's my point there. David could sail into very detailed fantasy right away. He had that gift. And I just enjoyed that so much. And that's the one thing I can't do with anybody else, because it was so specific and so joyful. And that's what happens when you get to be a certain age and you start to lose people. You will never have those experiences that you had with them again. And that has been the heartbreaking part of this for me. And of all the people who I've known who I would miss the most, he's the top of the list. So thank you, Tony. This is just, he would love this. He would be restaging it. Yeah. And he would have that fierce look on his face that was so scary. You know, but he was a committed artist and a committed human. And I've never known his like. And I'm so grateful to have had him in my life. I love that picture of him, by the way. It looks like a 40s glamour shot. Anyway, thank you, Tony. This is beautiful.
And now, Sharon Parr.
Oh, boy. I'm an actress, so I have to have a script. Must have. Well, first, thank you, Tony, for putting this all together. He just drove right through it, did the whole entire thing, really, which is kind of amazing. This is a moment I thought would never come. I keep expecting to answer the phone and hear on the other end, Mademoiselle Sharon, it's me. But, ladies and gentlemen, non-binaries, guess what? Right here, right now, I think I can answer everyone's burning question. When did David Halstead Schweitzer's signature style begin? I have it on excellent authority that in 1978, at a closeout sale at the clothing store Amen, we all remember that, right? On Santa Monica Boulevard was where David found his first pair of leopard-printed jeans. They fit him perfectly. He bought them, and just like that, a fashion icon was born. He never looked back. And much like his relentless layering of vibrant animal prints, he himself was fabulous, determined, and unstoppable until he wasn't. He was a risk taker who encouraged those who worked and played with him to do likewise. One of my earliest memories of David happened on an August day in Manhattan in 1975. I was coasting down 7th Avenue on my bicycle when I saw him standing on a corner in Midtown. We barely knew each other, but I pulled over to say hello. He mentioned he was running late, and then with a wild glint in his eye, we all remember that glint, he asked if he could ride downtown to his appointment seated on my bicycle handlebars. Surprised, but flattered, I accepted his dare. And so he mounted up, and after more than a few moments of adjustment, we sailed downtown, laughing all the way until we crashed into a hot dog truck in Chelsea. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Over the next 5 decades, our lives intersected in various locales. There was Morocco, Williamstown, Long Beach, New York, Los Angeles, and New York. Because of David, I got to play many eccentric and usually funny dames, including Anita Bryant, Diotima, Countess Dorimani, Hermione, Gogol's mistress, a Russian whore, a dead wife of Bluebeard, and La Indian Queen. His mere involvement in a project made it an event. We shared work, laughs, outrage, insight, love, anger, gossip, and the occasional boyfriend. David was someone who made an effort to keep his friends. Once part of his artistic family, he never let you drift away. This was one of his many superpowers. He was not one to let a quarrel or an artistic rift get in the way of an ongoing alliance, a future project, or mutual love. In the course of his life, he directed hundreds of plays, operas, and theatrical events all over the world. David Halstead Schweitzer, like all the greats, was definite, uncompromising, and sometimes misguided, but always brilliant. Mere gratitude does not seem like adequate compensation for the boundless creativity he brought into all of our lives. But what can I say at this sad juncture but thank you, my darling Monsieur David. We will never, ever, ever, ever forget you. Isn't he gorgeous? He was so gorgeous.
Ladies and gentlemen, Reba Garretson.
the fellas. My ex-husband, Philip Littell. And my new ex-husband, Elliot Douglas.
Hello, darling. You look ravenous.
You look amazing.
You do too in this light, honey.
Young man, there's no need to feel down. I said, young man, pick yourself off the ground. I said, young man, 'cause you're in a new town. There's no need to be unhappy. When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Then I grew up and fell in love. I asked my sweetheart what lies ahead. Will we have rainbows day after day? Here's what my sweetheart said. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Now I have children of my own. They ask their mother, what will I be? Will I be handsome? Will I be rich? I tell them tenderly.
One pill makes you larger, and one pill makes you small. And the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall.
And if you go chasing rabbits and you know you're going to fall, tell them all hookah, smoking caterpillars has given you the call. For Alice, when she was this small, when the men on the chessboard get up and tell you where to go, and you've just had some kind of mushroom and your mind is moving low, go ask Alice, I think she'll know. When logic and proportion have fallen, so I'll be dead, and the white knight is talking backwards, and the red queens are ahead. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Feed your head. Feed your head. Feed your head. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And now, Max Schwartz.
Thank you, Tony. Like all of us, I've been missing David these last few months. But luckily, I remembered an amazing and magical thing. Some years ago, I was with our dear friend Taylor Negron, and Taylor and I went exploring in the Chateau Marmont Hotel, as one does, and in the back of the topmost hallway, in room 999, we found an old Bakelite telephone from the 1920s. But this was no ordinary old phone. It was a direct line to heaven. And here's the most surprising part. When you dial it, on the other end, only one person ever picks up. Truman Capote. So, just the other day, I went up to room 999 at the Chateau. That old phone was still there. Of course, I had to call up Truman and see how things were going, and the call went something like this. Hello, is Mr. Capote there? Hello, it's me, Truman. Hi, Mr. Capote, it's Max. Oh, is that what you're calling yourself these days, Max? Well, how are you doing, darling? Not great, Mr. Capote. We've all been missing our precious lizard, our dear Schnitzelbrain. Oh, yes, David Schweizer. Not to worry. I just saw him for cocktails. But Mr. Capote, isn't it 11 in the morning? I mean, heaven is on Pacific time. Yes, it's true. But up here, the cocktail hour starts at dawn and goes until dusk. And then after that, we sip the blood of Louise Brooks. It's like that movie, The Substance. Her Pandora's box blood keeps us young forever. Well, I hope that works out for you, Mr. Capote. Tell me, how is David doing up there? Well, let me tell you. David arrived here so suddenly. We know you were all bereft, but honestly, we here in heaven were just delighted. The moment old Schnitzelbrain got here, the party really got started. First of all, Tennessee Williams went chasing after him, just as if David were back to being a 20-year-old Yaley boy toy. Mind you, back in those days, me too meant me too. Well, anywho, David and Tennessee immediately concocted a plan to do a revival up here of The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore, starring, of course, the Broadway cast of Tallulah Bankhead, that crazy dyke, and Tab Hunter, that delicious dish. But Mr. Capote, from what I recall, that was not much of a success on Broadway. Oh yes, true, but when David got his hands on that play, he whipped it into shape. And it's already been running up here SRO for 2 months. Milk Train is especially popular with the angels. They laugh and weep and stomp their wings. Every night is a flying ovation. Well, Mr. Capote, that's very exciting. What's coming up next? Oh, very exciting, big news. David will be directing a new opera version of my wonderful book, In Cold Blood. That's right. Never has brutal, senseless murder been so stirring and life-affirming. Dmitri Shostakovich is writing the score for the opera, so you know there'll be lots of hummable tunes. Enrico Caruso is playing Perry Smith, and Luciano Pavarotti is playing the Clutter Family Barn. Very exciting, Mr. Capote. Oh, and David has been up here trying to get my swans to slim down. Yes, he wants them all slim. He got them on that crazy diet of his. It involves a strict regimen of deviled eggs, roasted nuts, and 14 gallons of vodka. I've got to say, though, that I'm frankly sick and tired of David's leopard print outfits. What is this? Are we on a safari? I feel like I'm trapped in Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I know it's important to have a style, but understatement can be your overstatement. Well, Mr. Capote, this was very comforting, a bit strange, but comforting, and I'm hoping that you'll give my best to David. Oh, yes, I will. We're very lucky up here in heaven because we have him and you don't. But not to worry, we'll be seeing you up here very soon. Well, Mr. Capote, hopefully not too soon. Bye-bye.
And now, Barry Shills.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you, even on this sad occasion. But as many of you may know, certainly Richard Kramer knows, I also knew David over 50 years. We went to college together with Richard. I was a freshman when David was a junior, and I didn't know him at first, but basically fell in love from afar after seeing some undergraduate productions that he was already putting up like every 3 months. You know, he was there for 2 years. I must have seen like 10 things that aren't even on that list that Tony put together with thousands of productions. And I remember I think even though, I made it to Yale, I don't think I ever heard of Tennessee Williams or Henrik Ibsen before I met David or started going to his plays. So I can honestly say that the thing that came out of my Yale education was meeting David. That's the most prominent memory, and I think my finest educator. And ever since, he became my amazing friend, but also always a mentor. And I'm a filmmaker, and he's been involved in every one of my projects in one way or another, giving advice. Oh, I have to just say one thing about the time at Yale. The first show I saw, I think, was A Doll's House. And he cast an actress, he was smart enough to go to the Yale Drama School to try to find some terrific actors. And he cast this actress I hadn't seen. No one really knew who she was. I thought, oh, she's pretty good. She probably has a future. Well, guess who it was? Meryl Streep. Leave it to David to find Meryl Streep, in a drama school before anybody else, And even back then, his plays were dazzling visually, I don't think he hadn't met an Anne yet, but that spark was there. Everything was dazzling. I also have to say that David, I think the first time I ever saw a drag queen perform on stage was a David Schweizer production. It may have even been Shakespeare measure, But a few people were in drag, and I was like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. And I went on to make a movie called Wigstock. And David worked with me all behind the scenes. And when I was lucky enough to afford a crane, which is like 15 grand a day, I put David on top of it. And I said, get me some great shots. And sure enough, he did. He's just been such a big part of my life. Another movie I made, Vampire's Kiss, I got financing for it out here from a company called Hemdale, and we were trying to get the script to Nicolas Cage, And his agency, William Morris, I don't know if there's any of you here in the audience, but we had financing, but not a lot. It was an indie film, a few $1 million. We made an offer. They would not give him the script because it was not enough. And this went on for months. Finally, my dear friend David finds a way around William Morris through his delicious relationships with actors, and I won't name names, but Nicholas got the script, fell in love with it, did it, and it's like one of his favorite movies he's ever made, and David Schweizer made it happen. I mean, Okay, the last thing I'll say is, of course, like all of you, I'm heartbroken that he's not here and we can't get his sweet emails and go to his incredible parties. Oh, by the way, I also was his roommate for like 40 years. We shared the loft in New York. I found it first, but he always invited me out here when I was starting my career to stay at his home in Venice on Dell Street. And then when he came to New York to do things, he would stay at this loft in the early days of Tribeca. It was a sewing factory that barely had been converted. And he would throw those great parties on New Year's Day. Everyone would say, oh, I don't have to do anything on New Year's Eve. I can stay home and then go out on New Year's Day. I can still see David with his tray of deviled eggs. And it thrilled me that he made that place very special. There were always rehearsals going on there, or costumes being fitted, and I just loved it. But anyway, I fell in love with the beach and Venice and Santa Monica, and it's because of David. But what I wanted to say was, of course I'm heartbroken, but I'm wondering why aren't I more sad? And I realize it's because I'm happy that he went fast without a lot of suffering. We've seen a lot of our friends die and go through months and months of hospitalization. And no, he dropped dead in a theater. I mean, how perfect. Mwah. And, so I feel like he had a brilliant life. It could have been a few years longer, but so fulfilled, and he's still here with all of us, inspiring us. Happy birthday, David. We love you. Mwah.
And now, let me introduce.
I wanted to say one other thing. Kramer, and I told him not to say it because I was going to say it. I hear from people who've worked with David that he would get upset like any artist, and like Ann said, and scream and yell if something wasn't right. In my friendship, I never had a single argument with him in over 50 years. Now, maybe it's because I saw him as a mentor and a muse, but still, people live together, you have arguments. You have arguments with your family. He had the most exquisite manners, which is very kind of unusual in the business we're in, But anyway, God bless you.
And now, let me reintroduce our musicians, John Snow and Patrick Sargent.
a brief message from all of us that are working here now at the Theater Center.
As you may know, October has been declared National AIDS Awareness and Prevention Month, and artists that are involved in live performances have been invited to speak to their audiences to help to spread a message of compassion and concern. In our case, it was an invitation that we embraced eagerly. Many of us, and I'm sure many of you, have been dealing with this disease on a day-to-day basis for a while now, caring for friends and loved ones who might be sick, in some cases losing them. We don't mean for this message to be a mournful one, though. Our sense of awareness is, well, to us it means gathering the knowledge to be helpful. There's a tremendous amount that we can do. There are so many relief and service organizations in this community, desperately understaffed and underfunded, that can use our help, not just our financial help, but even our time. You would be amazed the difference that a few hours a week of volunteer time, even over the telephone, could make to the comfort of a patient who might be suffering alone due to the many fallacies which still exist around the transmission of this disease. And finally, as it's kind of impossible not to realize in this moment, we feel that awareness has to extend to political awareness. Now, this is a theater, not a political arena, and we know that you didn't come here to be lectured on what you're supposed to do in November. However, we beg you to consider very carefully your choice on Propositions 96 and 102, which are going to be on your ballot in November. In former years, we've been able to defeat pretty easily things like the Lyndon LaRouche proposals, but these new measures are being regarded in a far more benign way by voters. Some polls predict they will pass. We feel that they pose the same grave threat to personal liberties, to civil rights, and promote an atmosphere of fear and hysteria around this disease, which is medically unfounded and very damaging to the painstaking education process, which has made such progress. So we urge you to please think very carefully about your choice, to speak to your friends. We have literature on the service organizations and on the propositions in the lobby. Please take a look on your way out. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving.
And now, Dory Baisley.
Thanks, Tony. My friendship with David began in 1978. He was new in Los Angeles. He was directing a play I'd written for a theater company I was working for, and we fired him. You know, it would have been easy for him to walk away, blow us off. We weren't that big a deal. But David came back and asked if I would talk to him. And that talk was unlike anything I was used to until that point. We were honest. We were absolutely straightforward with each other. No dancing around or defending any point of view. And it was really uncomfortable. And I think that somehow embedded us in each other's lives from then on, which is almost now getting close to 50 years. When Ed and I got married, David and Donald came to our wedding as on-the-spot reporters. Donald did the interviews, and David provided the color commentary, which was quite interesting. When it was the 90s, I got asked by a group of young actors in Prague if I could get a director for them to do a production of my version of Christmas Carol, and it was almost Christmas at that point. I asked David, can you go to Prague in 10 days And he said, can I get first class tickets on British Airways? And I said, yeah, and we did it. They sponsored it. And he directed the most incredible Czech and English production of A Christmas Carol. I have to tell you that his return trip was he used one ticket on British Airways to fly from Prague to London, to Oslo, to London, to New York, to London, and return to Los Angeles. That was his return flight. And then a couple of years ago, when my son Andy had a gallery show in New York, David asked right away if he could throw a cocktail party at the Loft to celebrate it with lots of deviled eggs. And I think that for the rest of my birthdays, I will hear his voice and see those huge capital letters of that happy birthday message to my dearest D, scrolling down from your utterly devoted Silvery D. And now, David, on your birthday, I promise that I will keep that voice in my head as long as I am alive, from your devoted D.
Hi, I'm Jan Monroe. David and I worked together probably 4 or 5 times, not just with me acting for him, but with him stepping in and working with me on some work that I was creating. Very specifically, a piece called Notes on Performance, which was done. Wow, there are some old people here. If you were here in the 80s in Los Angeles, or if you weren't here in the 80s in Los Angeles, it was kind of a wonderful stew that none of us had any money, none of us had any status. People just did the work. They did wonderful work. They said, look, we're going to throw this against the wall to see if it sticks, and we did. And, there was a milieu, there was a floating repertory company. If David was doing something, Fleck, me, Tony would float into it. If I was doing something, Tony, Susan Falcon, who was a dancer friend of mine, and David would be doing something, would bring him in. So it was kind of a wonderful, wonderful time to be here. Of course, Philip Littell and Wieben, all of us knew each other back then. If anything I have to thank David for, it's for all of you, that over the last 40, or has it been almost 50 years now, I can say you have been in this impossible town. We have been an improbable community of supporters of each other's work, of each other's good work, in spite of it all. In spite of being neglected, in spite of being put down for living in Los Angeles, in spite of having no money to do the work. We did the fucking work. We fucking did it because we had no excuse not to. So, of course, in the 80s, if you were doing new, interesting work, Schweizer would sooner or later float into your sphere. Now, I had already been creating work for 10 years, so I was not a novice, and I was working on for Notes on Performance, which was being produced by the Wallen Boyd, thank you, Scott Kelman, and Mocha. And where was I going with this? Well, so David floated in. Now, we instantly liked each other. We were both adventuresome in the theater world. We both weren't so much concerned with what theater was, but what it might be, what it could be. We were both fascinated by French culture, because I speak French and I've also lived there. But by some quirk of biology, I ended up straight. A fact which he forgave me for. But anyway, so David comes in the notes on performance. Tony Abatamarco, Susan Falcon, and I did the original version. Then we decided to expand it. We said, well, let's get a director. I said, okay, fine. So Schweizer, there he is. So we bring him in. He starts directing. He, of course, manages to insert himself into the show. Only like David Schweizer could insert himself into the show. And a few of my friends came to see her and said, you know, can you tone him down just a little bit? So I can say I'm probably the only person in this room who has tried to direct David H. Schweizer. And I can only compare it to, well, it's somewhat akin to giving a feral, uncut, fresh off the streets tomcat his first bath. God bless him, though. After about 10 minutes, I walked out with my eyes still intact and just a few scratches. And we were still very close friends, and we stayed very close friends. Unfortunately, what I found in my life with David was that we just didn't see each other as much as I would have liked. We didn't work together really for probably 10 to 15, 20 years past a certain point in his life. But I was glad he was here. Even if sometimes I didn't agree with his work, I was glad he was doing his work. And I always loved his attitude about the work, which is there's no excuse not to do it. There is no excuse not to try something new. There's no excuse, just because it hasn't been done, not to fucking give it a shot. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's please remember that as his lesson to us. David, thank you.
And Sandra Tsing Loh.
This is not part of my prepared thing, but I saw that show at the Wallen Boyd. I didn't know any of you. It was on the back pages of LA Weekly, and I thought David Schweizer was the star.
That was after I directed it.
The year was 1998, a kinder, gentler time. We were all so young then, weren't we? I was a 36-year-old Asian American solo performer on the rise. Second Stage in New York was producing my new off-Broadway show, Bad Sex with Bud Kemp. That's what we wrote about in those days. Bad Sex with Bud Kemp. You need a director who's funny, Carol Rothman said, worriedly. But then she suddenly giggled, rare for her. How about David Schweizer? I couldn't tell if David was funny right off. He was a smallish, quietly wry, to me, inscrutable man, given to fancy hats and leopard prints and orthopedic shoes, bearing satchels with Evian water bottles that might or might not contain vodka. Eventually, I'd embrace David's quirky diet during a particularly intense keto phase. Max Schwartz, you remember those. David swapped our traditional Bloody Marys for bull shots, where you use, beef bouillon as a mixer instead of tomato juice, because of the carbs. Four, okay. Solo performers often struggle with directors, at least I do. I'm a decent writer, but a terrible actor. When I'm in a play, instead of reacting to the other characters, my blank look reveals I'm simply waiting for them to stop talking so I can loudly say my lines. Many theater directors refuse to work on solo shows because what they'd really like to do is recast the lead, which is you. just could have cut off that last phrase. I see David would give me that note. Just recast the lead and then period. Okay. By contrast, David Schweizer was known as the director of solo shows on both coasts. He relished it, and this is how he did it. As opposed to other directors who constantly poke you in rehearsals, don't make that face, don't wave your arms, learn to act. David's method was to kind of ignore you. You know what I'm talking about. As you rattled on, hour after hour after hour. Sometimes he'd doodle in a notebook while taking sips of Evian. Over the weeks, he'd flag words or movement to articulate better, but mostly you were just running it in a kind of void. Which was good, because when you finally got into the theater, the performer had zero time on stage. Tech was David's week to ride the light and sound designers who were always brilliant, young, and tired. Little bottles of Evian that they're shipping, as opposed to a monologist's simple stool and glass of water, which I was used to. Here was David's staging of a solo show at the Tiffany Theater on Sunset, 99 seats. Okay, it was Aliens in America, and the opening story is called My Father's Chinese Wives, about my Chinese father marrying a bunch of mail-order brides. So instead of something tasteful, the set was a giant Jasper Johns American flag made entirely out of individual white Chinese takeout boxes, a human-sized box made out of rice paper that I would kick through every night to a loud Chinese gong, which instead was seated on a 360-degree turntable, at which point would magically produce a Buick. I'm not kidding. Maybe. First preview for paying audiences, half an hour before curtain, it still wasn't clear the Buick would fit on the stage. Never mind. At 8:07 we began. I'd never actually run the show on stage, so I just kept talking loudly and rapidly while trying not to get thrown off the turntable. The show was a big hit. Aside from solos, David was also the go-to director for opera, which may seem paradoxical, but I think it isn't, in that both forms are essentially musical, hence in solo work, David's notorious Belle. His 1998 Long Beach opera sensation, La Indian Queen, did not depend on any linear narrative. Picture like Aztec ancient Mexico, bucolically envisioned by 1960s English Baroque composer Henry Purcell, radically updated by Chicano performance artist Guillermo Gomez Peña, starring gloriously blonde and Aryan Sharon Barr in full Incan headdress riding out on a giant stiletto shoe. Title of classical music, Alan Rich's review, referencing an actual pre-show warning to the show, nudity, gunshots, sex, feathers. His review was a rave. There will never be another David, but if there is a silvery D LeMay lining to our grief, and thank you, Michael Sargent, for your silvery D outfit, it's, as people are saying, it's the richness of the community he made. I mean, obviously, we're the most fun people in this world. But apparently, other cities think they have fun David Schweizer friends too. Okay, so I remember back in December after an early memorial planning meeting at the Loft, drinking in some Irish dive bar with some New York friends of David, FODs I just met. It does help that friends of David are rarely sober vegetarians, or at least they're not out about it as the ham comes out. Anyway, somehow, 14 healthful zero-carb martinis later, our tears turned to laughter in swapping David theater stories. His art was never boring, and there's no one else you could say, if they're doing a show, it's like, grab the car keys. Whatever it is, grab the car keys. Friends of David, I said probably quite loudly, we're like this cool tribe, club, or secret society. From this day forth, after March and his birthday, we march Under the leopard flag! Okay, and how do you march under the leopard flag? Let me bring to stage my esteemed partner, Friar McAllister, who many of you know, who David, introduced us, so I blame him. Okay, so recently, there was that Sondheim Bernadette Peters opening at the Amundsen, okay? And the official dress code from CTG said, and I quote, "We encourage guests to dress in a way that makes them feel elegant and stylish, while welcoming expressions of personal and cultural style, including traditional regalia." And I'm thinking, what do you mean, rice paddy hats, kimono? What do you want me to come in? But then I knew. From my culture, my tribe, my traditional regalia is this. This is what I wore to the Amundsen opening. Straight from David Schweizer's closet. David Schweizer's leopard in reversible bathrobe, see? What's this? An inner pocket for a bell. And what's this over here? A secret flask in case the Amundsen ever gets boring. We hail you, David, and love you. You'll inspire us always. Under the leopard flag!
So, quite a while ago, am I on? No. Do I do something? I'm on. All right. Oh, whoa. Okay. I was visiting Jerry Frankel, who was not doing well. He had those periods where we thought, oh, okay, he's on his way out. And, but always elegant, happy, relaxed. And I was sitting by his bed, and I said, I've been reading Plato's Symposium, and I thought it might be a really good play. And Jerry looked up at me and said, let's do it. And I went, let's call David Schweizer. And then David got busy and called a bunch of other people. So here we are. Oh, those of us who are left, ça va sans dire.
But all part of the original.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Listen, Socrates. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Listen, Socrates, no one wants to mate with ugliness or rot, only beauty. But love requires an object, and the object of love isn't only physical beauty.
Then what is it?
It's procreation and bringing forth new birth in beauty.
If you say so, Diotima.
I do. And you must agree, procreation is the nearest thing to immortality we humans can attain. And since love leads to wanting it forever, we must desire immortality as well as love. Why is it that even beasts in love behave like fools?
I have to confess, I don't know.
And you claim to know all about love. Listen, everything mortals seek immortality, existence without end. Nothing mortal can ever stay the same the way a god can. But we can replace ourselves with some new creation, a new birth. It's our offspring, both physical and spiritual, that ensure our place in the eternal scheme of things. That's our immortality, Socrates.
That, you're a very wise woman, but I can hardly believe all of this. But she went on, believe it. Think how mad and irrational men's ambitions sometimes seem. But if you think of it as their attempt to achieve a fame that will last forever, it all makes a certain sense.
Everyone nowadays wants to be famous. And they're willing to risk everything for it.
Do you think they wouldn't if they didn't expect to gain fame everlasting? I respect them for it. They're in love with immortality.
If this desire is purely physical, then you get yourself a woman and have children. With a little luck, your descendants will remember you for several generations.
But when this desire is spiritual, as it is for many of us,
then we must give spiritual birth.
Our offspring are the arts, the creative impulses of poets and painters and actors and dancers and musicians and craftsmen of all kinds.
and also the art of government, when practiced by men of wisdom and sobriety.
If in youth one is inspired by spiritual qualities, then when older they will create and begin their search for a way to satisfy their desires and be drawn to beauty, never to ugliness.
If we're lucky enough to encounter a beautiful lover who possesses a beautiful soul, we rejoice.
Oh, yes. We rejoice because now we have a companion in the quest.
Our physical needs are satisfied, and we can give birth to the immortal works we dream of.
A partnership is created whose affectionate bond will nurture great art.
Such lovers have a stronger bond between them than even parents and children. They form true relationships since they have beauty and immortality at the center. Who wouldn't want such offspring for themselves?
Now listen closely, Socrates. It must begin when one is young. With proper guidance, one's first love may be beautiful and the relationship intense, but later they realize that physical beauty in one person is akin to the physical beauty that may be found in all things, everywhere.
But you become less obsessive.
Become a lover of beauty in general.
Now, the next stage is to recognize that beauty of the mind and soul is more valuable than beauty of the body.
When you meet someone with these qualities, even if they're not perfectly beautiful, you'll begin to love and cherish them.
You begin to realize then that even among souls, all beauty is akin. And concentrating on that, physical beauty will begin to pale. Your eyes are now fixed on beauty in the widest possible sense, and you'll never again be a slave to the beauty of an individual. It doesn't matter if the object of this love is a man, a woman, or an activity. You can now behold the ocean of beauty without limits, and the abundant love of wisdom you develop will enable you to produce splendid thoughts and ideas, finally leading you to the contemplation of ultimate beauty.
Listen to me carefully, Socrates.
The person who has directed thought towards examples of beauty in this succession will suddenly have revealed to them, as they approach the end of their initiation, a beauty whose nature is unparalleled. And this beauty is the final goal of their efforts.
This beauty is, first of all, eternal. It neither comes into being nor passes away. There's nothing partial or divided about it.
It is whole, absolute, existing alone by itself forever, and all other kinds of beauty derive from it.
And yet its beauty neither increases or decreases. It never changes.
So a person will begin by loving beautiful individuals, then ascend step by step toward the absolute. From one example of physical beauty to many, then from the physical to moral beauty.
From moral to the beauty of knowledge.
Through various kinds of knowledge until they attain that supreme knowledge whose sole object is absolute beauty.
This, more than anything else, is the realm where a person's life should be spent, in the contemplation of absolute beauty.
Do you think that's a poor life for a person to lead, Socrates? The contemplation of absolute beauty and union with it? Don't you see that only there, with eyes wide open, will someone be able to give birth to true goodness, not mere reflections of it? They'll finally be in the presence of truth.
And having given birth to true goodness, they will have the privilege of being loved by God and becoming, if ever a person can, immortal. That is what I learned from David Schweizer. So everyone, thank you. And please, today, as we celebrate his life and work on his 75th birthday, and as long as his legacy prevails, honor love in his name. Please join us in the lobby for birthday cake and a happy birthday song. Thanks, everyone.
Father, all on me.
The night is bitter, the stars have lost their glitter, the winds grow colder, suddenly you're older, and all because of the man that got away. No more his eager call, the writings on the wall, the dreams you've dreamed have all gone astray. The man that won you has run off and undone you. That great beginning has seen a final inning. Don't know what happened. It's all a crazy game. One more that all-time thrill, for you've been through the mill and never run. Love will be the same. Good riddance, goodbye. Every trick of his, you're on to. But fools will be fools, and where's he gone to? The road gets rougher, it's lonelier and tougher. With hope you burn up, tomorrow he will turn up. There's just no let up, the livelong night and day.